We're live. Adam, this has been 2 years in the making. We've talked about it endlessly for 2 years now. Probably like once a month for the last 2 years, but we finally made it happen. Welcome to episode 1 of Underlying Principles. How are you doing, man?
Man, we did it. We did it. I gotta say, hey, you've seen the show like Family Guy before, right? I mean, I think everyone's seen
I'm
the show
rewatching
Family
it right
Guy.
now, actually.
So there's a really famous thing about Family Guy is it got canceled very early on, and the fans like asked for it to come back. So much so that like eventually Fox picked it up and they brought the show back. I feel like that's what this show is. The people have been asking for Underlying Principles. They've been sliding in my DMs. Hey, what happened to the show? What's going on? 2 years in the making. We're finally dropping it. It is here. It is time. Let's get it.
We already have one comment rolling in. We have Michael Duncan saying, "Tell Adam I said hi." So
that's my dude. That's my dude. Dunks right there.
The comments already rolling in. Like, man, I'm really glad to be here. I'm really glad to be doing this with you finally. I think it's going to be a really cool show. Pretty vague on Twitter when we were rolling this out, but pretty much what it's going to be. It's going to be a quick show. We're going to have a couple of topics that are going to revolve around medical advice as well as analytical advice, maybe something that is hot in terms of what's being talked about in the fantasy or football community. And we're going to break it down in a way that can take complicated topics and make it a little less complicated. But we're going to go ahead and get started out talking a little bit about Adam. We're just going to go over his background a little bit, why you should even listen to him about any medical advice at all. But Adam, tell people a little bit about yourself, where you got your degree and what you're up to right now.
Yeah, for sure, man. So I'm a physical therapist by trade. That's what I do every day. Been navigating this fantasy space for a little bit. Had the pleasure of working at the Undroppables for a while with you. Shout out to the Godfather Chalk for giving me the opportunity to write for the website and work with it. It was a blast, and I'm still really close with a lot of guys there. Right now, you can find my content online at 4for4.com, 4for4 Fantasy Football. I do weekly injury breakdowns for the website, discuss fantasy football implications for things like that. So like you talked about, I'm going to be taking the medical side, focusing on injuries and how it pertains to fantasy football and what fantasy footballers can expect. I know you asked the question. I know the people are dying to know because I don't think they know that I went to Purdue University. That's my school. I know I try to keep that under wraps. I don't like to talk about Purdue that much. I'm pretty secretive about it if you follow me on Twitter. But I feel safe revealing it today to the community out there that, yeah, I'm a big Boilermaker. We're going to be tweeting a lot about them in March here as we roll into March Madness.
We lasted 3 minutes and 41 seconds before the first mention of Purdue. And I am very disappointed in myself that I could not keep us off that topic.
No, man.
Longer than 3 minutes and 41 seconds.
Honestly, it's you should probably give yourself a pat on the back that we lasted that long. To be honest. Yeah, man. Yeah.
So before we get into a little bit about the medical side, kind of what some of the things that we'll be talking about, some of the things that you're looking at. It's been a crazy week in football. Probably one of the more crazy weeks that I can remember to date. But a lot of huge trades, a lot of huge signings, some things that were kind of thrown under wraps. Adam actually has no clue what the reactions that I'm going to be asking for from him on what news topics. These are going to be quick hitting, just kind of spur of the moment reactions from Adam. Here we go. First one, Bears fan. You're a Bears fan.
Am I? So, yeah, I am. I don't know how much we're going to get into that because I know we got a tight show sheet today. When they hired Matt Eberflus, I texted my dad and I was like, I'm done. I'm not. So I'm actually searching for an NFL team out there. So
Yeah.
if people have a team that I should be a fan of, my loyalties lie nowhere. I'm looking for a team.
Okay.
Shoot me a DM. Hit me on Twitter. I'm looking for teams. But yes, I was formerly a Bears fan.
And this is a totally unbiased question then that I'm asking you because you have no stake in this game anymore. Bears finalizing Mac to Chargers. They're going to be getting a 2022 second round pick and a 2023 sixth round pick. This year they keep $24 million in dead cap on roster, but next year, according to one of the cap websites, I'm sorry for who referenced this originally, and I'm taking their content, but they will have $121 million in cap space in 2023. Thoughts on that trade?
If I cared, which I don't because I'm not a Bears fan, I would say I don't really know. I mean, that was a big salary relief that they got there for their cap.
Right.
I mean, for what the Bears gave up, multiple first round picks to get Khalil Mack, and we didn't even capitalize it. We had like one halfway decent season, and then we just shipped him off for a second round pick. I mean, I think it could be worse, but I'm sure Bears fans are disappointed. I think it was probably the right thing to do. Right. Ryan Pace left that team with like no draft picks and no cap space, just a complete dumpster fire. So you got to start somewhere. And that was their most valuable asset that they could offload. So I don't hate it, to be honest with you.
Feels like a tough pill to swallow for Bears fans who the GM making his first move is shipping off Mac. Probably not the best thing to get the fans on your side, but I understand the move as well. Next thing, we'll go ahead and skip the Rodgers thing because I think that's kind of old news now. I don't think there's much ramification to talk about other than maybe it resulted in this move, which was Russell Wilson being traded to the Denver Broncos for Drew Lock, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks. The Broncos also got a 4th-round pick for this upcoming year. What are your thoughts there, Adam?
Fantasy-wise, I love it. I think this is going to be a guy that we talk about later today and probably in future shows in terms of, well, I guess it's a pair of guys in Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, especially for dynasty purposes, but it's got to be upward arrow trending up for those guys. You got to be excited if those are people that you were rostering on your dynasty leagues. And then just in terms for Russell Wilson, I mean, I know it's kind of cliche at this point, but they're going to let him cook, right? They got to let him cook. You don't make that trade and don't let Russ cook.
Maybe. I don't know. Did the Broncos let anyone cook? I mean, you probably don't want Drew Lock cooking over there.
No. Maybe mac and cheese. You let Drew Lock whip up some mac and cheese.
Yeah, it'd be so bad. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I mean, that's just kind of what you got to pay up to get Russell Wilson. Honestly, I think the Seahawks don't really know what they're doing. I think they're at a point where they don't know. I mean, I guess they're in full rebuild stage, but I don't think they were preparing for that this offseason. I think they handled the Russell Wilson situation terribly. I think they chose Pete Carroll over Russell Wilson, which I don't think is smart. And I don't really know where they go from here. I guess they can try and draft Malik Willis with that 9th overall pick, but I mean, you're just playing slots at that point. You don't know if he's going to be any good, and it could end up being a fire sale here pretty soon. But I don't know if they have a true direction right now.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair counterpoint. Like, as much as we're excited for Denver, I think for Seattle, you're just kind of like, ooh, what's going on here? They did get a lot of draft capital, but a lot of uncertainty for sure, like you said.
Yeah. Okay, last topic. So according to Grinding the Mocks, David Bell has dropped to pick 80 in mock drafts, and that is putting him at wide receiver 13, currently behind guys like Justin Ross, 5'5" Wan'Dale Robinson, and even Cincinnati wide receiver Alec Pierce.
Oh, God. Did we have to get Alec Pierce in there? Like, geez.
Kick me right in the groin. As wide receiver 10, according to Grinding the Mocks. 3 wide receiver spots ahead of David Bell.
First off, Grinding the Mocks, that sounds That sounds like a
it's very
naughty
good.
website.
If you have not used Grinding the Mocks, you need to give it a try. It's a very good
Does
website.
your wife know that you're on Grinding the Mocks? If she looked through your browsing history, she'd be like, Blake, what's going on here?
Well, I'm more concerned that it's on my work computer, that they're gonna my IT guy's gonna pull it up and be like, "What in the hell?"
Yeah, that's
going
questionable.
on
That's
here?
questionable at best. No,
Right.
I don't love it. I'm gonna be honest with you. I do not love it. I think when you said Alec Pierce, that's a little bit too much slander for me. I get it. I mean, I think prior to the draft combine, for me personally, I had David Bell in that upper tier. He's not going to get the draft capital at this point to be in that upper tier. I think someone's going to get a nice treat in the third, hopefully not, but potentially the fourth round of like the real NFL draft.
Right.
Because there's going to be guys like Calvin Austin, Sky Moore, the Boise State guy. I'm blanking on his name. I apologize. Yeah, that are going to go ahead of him just because of speed. I think that's a mistake. I've been on record. I was a big Rondale Moore fan. I was on record. I thought David Bell would be a better pro. I just think he's a pro. Like if you watch, I'm not a big film guy, but I watch a lot of Purdue football. When Purdue needed a first down, everyone in the stadium knew David Bell was getting the ball, and he still got the ball. He's a very good route runner. He's got the stickiest hands in college football. I'll stick to that. I mean, he catches everything. And I think it makes sense now, going back when a lot of teams played zone coverage on Purdue and some of these shell defenses, David Bell struggled. I think we're realizing now it's because he's not very fast. But just ask any Iowa fan out there, if you play man-to-man coverage on David Bell, he will smoke you. He will take you to the woodshed. I think he's a very good number two, and that this might be helpful, I guess, if he goes in the third round or whatnot, because he'll never be asked to be a team's true number one. I think he could be a very good number two, though, in the NFL, and I think he is a pro. I think day one he can show up to training camp, slot in, and he's going to be running routes and performing like he's been there for a while.
Well, I think we've worn out our welcome on Purdue football talk.
Till next time, guys.
I apologize to everyone for bringing it up. I just wanted to see him wince by hearing those wide receivers currently going ahead of him in the mock drafts that are going on. Okay, back to topic at hand. So this is just going to be a little bit of an introduction. We're going to go through just some of the things we're looking at. And then starting next week, we're going to actually dive into some really interesting topics that we've kind of come up with over the last couple years. But when it comes to injuries, so I feel like the injury space is getting a lot bigger for fantasy football. I feel like there are so many injuries that are happening on a weekly basis. Everyone's immediately running to Twitter and messaging their favorite injury analyst to get a initial insight onto what it looks like. When you're watching these events happen, and when you see someone get injured on the field, what is it exactly that you're focusing on, I guess, from an initial standpoint when you're trying to get that information out immediately, and then thereafter when you're trying to diagnose something later?
Yeah, I think this is something that I've tried to figure out for myself too as I navigate this this space in fantasy football, because like you said, it's becoming, not just in general, fantasy football has become a pretty saturated market, but you've seen a lot of that with the injury content as well. For me, I enjoy watching football. I see a lot of football. My camera turned off, but can you still hear me?
I can hear you, but I don't see you.
As I was saying, I get really camera shy.
It's all good. We're working through the kinks. Show number 1.
Let me see there.
There we go. You're back.
I try to just diagnose those injuries and get out what I'm seeing on there. I mean, video only tells so much, but you can learn a lot from video, and seeing various injuries, building up kind of a repertoire of what you're looking for. And then when I'm on the rehabbing side, just from my schooling and background knowledge, I can kind of get an idea. But mostly for fantasy gamers, like A lot of them just want to know how long is the player going to be out, and
Right.
when he comes back, is he going to be good? So I'm trying to make that as easy as possible for fantasy gamers. I'm slowly building a database of just injury data just to get some raw numbers and averages in terms of return to play time versus, in NFL players versus typical research. And then for fantasy purposes, their fantasy production when they return on a points per game basis and things like that.
Right. So, I mean, there's so much data today just about any counting stat in the NFL, yards, even ridiculous stats, yards per team attempt, dominator rating, all these other things. Are you having to essentially build your own database from scratch for
Yeah,
injury
because
items?
as it pertains to injury, I mean, I'm using other people's databases for fantasy points per game and games played and going back and looking up type of injuries and some of it though it's a little frustrating because a guy will just get slammed with like a knee injury, which is important. Yeah, I want to know a knee injury, but was it a meniscus tear? Did he sprain something? Was it actually like a hamstring or a soft tissue injury and not necessarily the knee joint itself? So just trying to build up some more specifics in that regard and kind of building my own database. So I have something to actually a foundation to stand on when I'm talking about some of that stuff.
Yeah. And then, so in terms of actionable takeaways, as you kind of mentioned, I mean, it's primarily, as you said, uh, what a player, how long they're going to be out for, and then their results afterwards. Um, Based on that, the uh, the long-standing question: are players injury prone? You hear it all the time. I know there are a lot of people out there who say there are no injury prone players, but you'll literally see the same players have the same injuries, re-injure the same things, maybe injure a few different things over a few year span, and then unfortunately because of that they end up not being able to continue. The question: are players injury prone?
Short answer, no. Long answer, I think some players are. It kind of depends on a specific situation. I mean, the biggest thing that you'll hear any kind of injury analyst or injury doctor talk about is, the biggest predictor for a future injury is a previous injury. To a certain degree of that, that's kind of lying in that, okay, well, then that person's injury prone to that specific injury. I think there are specific players, and we've seen a couple of them in the NFL that injuries just seem to follow them, and it's become more of a pattern where it's just like, this isn't just bad luck, like this is something that's been building up. But it's definitely not to the degree that people throw out there on Twitter, that might necessarily be looking at it through the same lens that I'm looking at or someone else that's talking about injuries is looking at. Like Christian McCaffrey is a big one. A year ago, Joe Mixon was a big one. Those are guys that I am not ready and weren't putting in the injury prone category that seem to unfairly get labeled that way.
Yeah, I mean, people are really. I mean, there are people who don't even have Christian McCaffrey in their top 10 for dynasty running backs, and
that's a sin.
That is purely circled around the injury prone label because he's still a top 3 talent, top 1 talent, really running back in the NFL. So, yeah, man, I think that's a lot of people's hang up when it comes to, I mean, you hear it all the time that, as I just mentioned with Christian McCaffrey, there's a lot of players who drop in people's rankings every year because of the injury prone label and they can't play a full season. And so, yeah, I think that's a really important topic for sure.
Yeah, man. So, I want to steal the mic from you here a little bit. I want to switch it up. I want the audience members to get to know Blake Hampton a little bit better, the man behind the mystery Twitter profile pic. If they haven't been able to get to know you yet, Because you're the other part of this. With underlying principles, we're trying to bring something different to the table. We talked a lot about my medical stuff, but I want to talk a little bit about the analytics and what you're bringing to the team and what you're really, really good at, because I've been following you for a while. And I think you're really good at this stuff. So I just want to get a little bit of breakdown. What are, just in a basic concept, if you could give us kind of a breakdown of what analytics are and how it helps with some fantasy football stuff that we're looking at.
Yeah, man, for sure. So I went and got a definition of analytics, because lately I feel like anyone that has a stat and runs to Twitter calls it analytics. But the exact definition of it is: analytics is the systematic computational analysis of data and statistics. It is used for the discovery, interpretation, and communication of meaningful patterns in data. And the keyword is meaningful. So essentially what analytics are trying to do is it's trying to take a group of numbers and find meaningful, sorry, we are getting a lot of buffering for the show. It seems good on my end, but we'll keep powering through. I think we're okay right now. But essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to take a group of statistics and try and find meaningful predictors, meaningful outcomes, and trying to find inefficiencies in the way things are currently being done. And so it's taking, so like, for instance, one of the big stats that are starting to become more popular is EPA, which is expected points added. And the reason that stat is so important compared to a typical counting stat like rushing yards is that the difference between getting 3 yards rushing on a 4th and 2 is different than getting 3 yards rushing on a 4th and 7. So taking that and finding how many points are added per play is going to be so much more important than just doing typical counting stats. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways that analytics can become useful, but a lot of people as of late are just claiming any single bad decision made by a coach is analytics as of late. And that's not necessarily the case.
So, I mean, building off of that, because I think there's always that debate between like analytics and film grinders out there. And I think we can appreciate that, watching film and those people that have a real talent for scouting players bring something to the table. But if we were talking to somebody, or some of our viewers are like, no, I'm purely a film guy, why is that not smart? Why is that dumb to be essentially ignoring the analytics side?
Yeah, I think it's dumb to ignore both sides of things. I think that some coaches say it really well. I think I heard Brandon Staley say that it's just a piece to the puzzle, right? Is the analytics side of things. If you're purely using analytics for decision making, I mean, even the best models, in quote, for fantasy football are shooting like 50%. So when you're taking analytics and you're purely using that, you're only getting it right about 50% of the time. And when you're purely using stats, you're missing a piece of the puzzle, which is the numbers. You're only going with your gut. And I mean, that could be as right as 5% of the time. Some of the brightest minds in football, I bet if they go and try and make a decision purely based on their gut, it could sway one way or the other. It could be also a coin flip in terms of how the success turns out thereafter. So it's really just a piece of the puzzle. Why you should care about it is it's kind of like the combine, right? I mean, people are saying all the time the combine doesn't matter. Well, it does kind of matter because NFL teams think it matters. So if the NFL team thinks that the combine matters, then it does matter in terms of projecting a player. And so that's kind of how it is with analytics. Teams are starting to value analytics more and more. There are teams that have full departments for analytics. And because they are caring more about it, it's advantageous for us to evaluate things analytically, to look at things similarly to how they're looking at it. As mentioned before, it's just another data point for you to be able to make decisions. And if you have another data point that'll give you percentage points to win a football game, or to pick a talented player who could potentially be a star for your team, why wouldn't you take that information in?
No, I mean that makes a ton of sense. You're just trying to make yourself better. You're just trying to give yourself as many tools in that tool belt to make the best educated decision. I wanted to ask one more thing that you touched on. You were talking about like stats that matter and things like that. Um, I guess it's a little double-sided question. You talked a little bit about expected points and like that. How do we tell what stats matter? And then I guess spinning off of that, are there any things that you're looking at or that you really hold on to in terms of analytics or things that stand out statistically that matter to you?
Yeah, so it's really going to be a long answer, and so I'll keep it pretty short. A lot of it is so the best way for you to take a single stat and determine if it's successful is just plotting stat to what you're trying to find. So if you're trying to find what stat is best correlated to touchdowns, you just pin it all. You just graph each one of those stats against touchdowns and see which one has the best correlation to one another. It's going to be a little bit subjective because a lot of people are interested in different things. And there's not, as I mentioned before, when it comes to analytics, even the best models are shooting about 50%. So a lot of people will take the data and kind of interpret it the way they want to. And that's one of the issues that you'll see too, is, I mean, you can make numbers say whatever you want to on them. But a lot of the items that teams are using today is things like fourth down decision making, and if they are going for it on fourth down, if they get the fourth down, how much percent chance does that give them to win compared to where they're at now? And if they don't get the fourth down, how much percent chance does it drop in terms of their win percentage? So that's kind of the big thing that's being used now, are things like fourth down decision making and goal line decision making as well. I guess that kind of goes with the fourth down way of doing things too. But I think you're going to start seeing it a lot more where you'll start to see, on first down, you have a 70% chance of making a first down if you decide to pass it instead of run it. I think that's going to start blending a lot more into the NFL going forward.
No, I like it, especially like tying in some of that real life football to the game that we love in the fantasy football and what we're going to be talking about predominantly on the show. I think it makes sense. I think it's really smart, and like I said, it's one of the reasons that I've always enjoyed your content and what you talk about on Twitter. So I'll give you a little shameless plug here. If you're not following Blake on Twitter, people, you need to be, because a lot of the stuff that he's talking about is going to help you make the most informed decisions for your fantasy football team and help you win games. So I like it. I think it's going to be a good foundation for the show too. I'm excited.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. We actually have another comment come up from Nick Johnson. Also, rushing yards are analytics, which he is not wrong. And that is exactly my point of anyone with a stat can run to Twitter and say that they are using analytics. I guess technically any number that you want to throw out is a stat and can be pushed towards
7.
Huh?
7, 13.
Yeah, 7 yards. Analytics. You were doing analytics now at this point.
It didn't take long. I'm on a show with you for 20 minutes and I just absorbed it and now I know it.
All right. Well, we're gonna keep this one a little short. As I said, we have some really cool topics over the next couple of weeks. One of the things we're looking at for next week is we're going to be looking at guys like Deebo Samuel, who are now, and you have Treylon Burks, who's also being compared this way, but are kind of hybrid wide receiver / running back prospects. And so next week we're going to be talking about what the injury probability risk goes up on those type of players or down. And then also what the volume output, do those players get less receptions because of it? Does it hurt the rest of the rushing production for that team because of that kind of output? So I think you're going to see a lot more of these hybrid type of players going forward. And so we're going to be talking about that pretty in depth next week. But we have our mailbag now, the original show segment that no one else does. So I'm excited, man. And here we go. First question from, I believe this was from Nick. Chalk 101 Chalk on Twitter.
The Godfather.
Yeah, he's our fearless leader. So we have to answer this one very well, and not mess it up. All right. Which do you favor? So this is going to be kind of in regards to the Russell Wilson trade. There's been a lot of back and forth between who's actually the better wide receiving core between the Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks. It may seem a little non-intuitive at first, but what receiving core do you like better, Adam? Do you like the Broncos or the Seahawks?
Me personally, I like the Broncos, and it's for one reason. And if you thought I liked Purdue, wait till you hear me talk about Cortland Sutton, because I love Cortland Sutton. And I think, honestly, you got me onto Cortland Sutton a while ago because I wasn't sure that he was very good. Mm-hmm. But Cortland Sutton's my guy. I'm trying to scoop him up everywhere. I'm a big Cortland Sutton fan. I tweeted about this earlier. I mean, I think getting Russell Wilson, when we just looked at like QBR, which is just quality of quarterback play, and how much this pertains to actual fantasy football output, I think is something that you would know better about. And maybe we can talk about something like that in the future. But they literally, over the past 2 years, the Broncos team QBR was like bottom half of the league. I think they ranked 25 out of 32. And Russell Wilson was in the top 10 the last 2 seasons. So they literally went from a bottom tier team to an upper tier team by just making this trade. I think you're going to see offensive drives extended a little bit longer, more points, obviously. And I think that helps Cortland Sutton. He's someone that's forgotten about a little bit because he came off that ACL tear. I talked a lot about him last year because I thought his route tree wasn't, in a positive form, wasn't that sophisticated, that coming off an ACL tear, he should be able to succeed. And it just didn't happen with Teddy Bridgewater. You know, he's last year is top 5 in unrealized air yards. He's getting a quarterback that likes to chuck it deep. And surprisingly, even in Seattle's system, Russell Wilson, the past couple of years has been, a top 5, top 10, quarterback in terms of deep passing attempts. So I think we're going to see Cortland Sutton succeed in a lot of different ways. And I guess before I flip that on you and have you answer, because I talked a lot about Cortland Sutton, I've seen this a lot on Twitter in terms of dynasty. Who would you, just in the Broncos offense, Sutton or Judy, like who would you rank higher? Who would you rather have on your team?
So if we're talking about purely a dynasty league, I'd probably go with Judy, only because of the age gap. And I think he has a higher ceiling at the end of the day. Like, I think he has a superstar type of ceiling. But if it was like a seasonal league, I'm probably going Sutton over him. As you said, I've been on Cortland Sutton for a couple of years. I think he's a really great player, was a really good prospect. All of his the amount of targets that he demands, even with the poor offense that they were running, has always been impressive, even though the numbers don't back it up. But that's purely because of how terrible their quarterback play has been over the last couple of years, and how conservative that offense has been in general. So I think that Judy, in terms of what he can become, but I mean, I really like Cortland Sutton too. I think that entire offense is just so primed to have a good quarterback like Russell Wilson, which is miserable for me because I am a Chiefs fan, and these last 2 days have been just miserable for me.
Yeah, they have.
But yeah, this one's a tough one. It seems like a quantity over quality type of thing, because I think Tyler Lockett's one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL over the last few years. DK Metcalf is not a human. I mean, he's a Greek god of a football player. He's been unreal in his first 2 years in the NFL. But as you said, I mean, Cortland Sutton, he's a really good talent. Jerry Jeudy is just on the verge of being tapped in terms of his talent. I don't think KJ Hamler is going to be a thing, but people seem to be excited about him. And then you have Alberto, the tight end, with his randomly shot up into the top 10 tight ends in Dynasty.
That's
He's a
insane to
freak.
me.
He's a freak of an athlete. I mean, tight ends are so tough to predict. I mean, if you're a good athlete and you get opportunity, you can end up being good. But we haven't seen it yet. But he has a good offensive line, but I'm still convinced that all of his sacks were not necessary. I mean, I think they were somewhat on him too for holding on to the ball and running out of a way that can, lead to him being more prone to sacks. But he does have a good running back in Jameson Williams. I think it's a great deal for the Broncos. If I had to pick one of these receiving cores to have on my team, I'd probably pick the Seahawks. Just because give me DK Metcalf, give me Tyler Lockett. I'm not sure what those other guys are going to be yet. I think they're going to be good, but I'm not sure yet.
Show one. We're already disagreeing. We're getting in fights. I'm going to send you a nasty text after this on why I'm Team Cortland Sutton, your Team Jerry Jeudy. I'm Broncos wide receivers, your Seattle wide receivers. And that's why people are going to tune in the show.
All right. Next question. I'm not sure who asked this one. I need to write these down next time. Just another dropping the ball on my end. I'm sorry, whoever asked these. Who are 3 rookie prospects with injury concerns? I'm not going to be able to answer this one. So
I got 2.
Okay.
I got 2 that I feel comfortable really, really talking about. And they're kind of big. They're big names. They're sexy guys that people are excited about for their rookie drafts in terms of dynasty leagues. First one being George Pickens. I included George Pickens on here because he had the ACL tear, I guess 2 years ago now. And his 2021 season was like basically a wash. He played. I think it was impressive that he was able to come back around 8 months out from ACL reconstruction surgery, but he didn't do a lot. When I watched him pre-injury, I thought this is a wide receiver that's super athletic, that's beating people down the field. He's getting behind defenders. He had a lot of athleticism. Listening to people that watch film, this isn't necessarily me talking. This is people talking about his film. I don't think he's a route running savant, but he was somebody that was really athletic and beating people in that ways. In that type of way. So we don't have a lot of data in 2021 to like support, whether he came back into that pre-injury level because we didn't see him do a whole lot. So I have a lot of question marks in that regard.
Yeah, man. People love him. I actually have him really high. He's in my, top 6 essentially for wide receivers, I think. He had he was a deep threat for them. 17.8 yards per reception. Early breakout age at 18 and a half years old in his breakout, had a really good combine in terms of his 40-yard dash, running a 4.47, and then having a 71st percentile speed score. So you're right. I mean, people really I like him a lot too. So
yeah. And I'm not saying we should drop him significantly.
Right.
But I think that's a question mark that people are just kind of looking past right now. And especially with, like we talked about with some of the combine, people are looking past it because of the combine, because they saw him go around out there and run like a 4.5 40, right, which is impressive. But if we're talking about ACLs, and if we talk about ACLs and they show a lot, the thing you'll hear me talk about is I don't really care how much acceleration that player has after an ACL injury. I care about the deceleration. I want to see him be able to develop some of that neuromuscular control, be able to break down in a route and change directions quickly. And I think conversely, that was something, and whether this is the reason he failed or not, but it was something that I was baking in when I was drafting. It was something I saw Tylan Wallace struggle with after his ACL injury, is he didn't have that same kind of control that I think he did pre-injuries level. So I wanted to see that from George Pickens. I thought it was a little disappointed. Some of these drills I don't care about. I was a little disappointed he didn't run the 3-cone drill. I think that would have given us some idea of, his ability to stop and change directions. His vertical tells us a little bit, but not a whole much. It didn't change a lot from high school. His 40 definitely changed a lot from his high school numbers. You can go on ESPN and look at these guys' high school combine numbers. So his vertical didn't change. I would have liked to see the 3-cone drill. So I think there's a question mark. Enough in the sense that for some of those other guys in his similar tier, I might take one of them ahead of him. Maybe I haven't looked into these guys too much, and it'll be interesting to see kind of where you have them ranked in your model. Maybe somebody like a Chris Olave. Before the combine, I was kind of leading David Bell. I don't think David Bell is going to have the draft capital to really be in the same.
David Bell or George Pickens as of today.
If you would ask me before the combine, I would have said David Bell and not hesitated. I think based on draft capital now, especially in terms of game theory, like if I really wanted David Bell, I could just trade back out of that rookie pick, have someone else pick up George Pickens, get a pick or two, and then get David Bell later in the draft.
I mean, that's what's going to happen now. I mean, David Bell, he could go in like the late 3rd, 4th round in the actual NFL draft, and you're going to get him for nothing in rookie drafts.
Yeah. So in rookie drafts, he's going to be a middle 2nd round pick at that point. So
how do we get back to David Bell?
I snuck it back in there, man. All day, baby. All day.
Always Purdue.
So, yep. So that's my thought on George Pickens. The other one that I wanted to talk about, just because when we talk about sexy prospects, I mean, Jameson Williams is one that people are like super excited about. Mm-hmm. He had that ACL tear in the college football playoff that everyone saw and noticed. I've seen some different stuff out there. You know, Jeff Mueller, who I follow on Twitter, he writes for DLF. He's been pretty optimistic on Jameson Williams. So I think that counts for something because Jeff's really smart. And when he talks about stuff, I definitely listen. And he swayed my opinion on some things a couple of times. I'm just a little bit nervous. So, you know, using 4for4's underdog information, because I'm a company man at 4for4, underdog, best ball ADP. Right now, Jameson Williams is going around wide receiver 54, 119 overall, which doesn't sound like super high, but you know, once the NFL draft comes along, that's going to jump up at least 20 to 25 picks. And he's going to kind of go in that Jalen Waddle range where I think it's going to be easy to draw the corollary Alabama wide receivers, speedsters, deep threats. I worry about some of these rookies with a big injury. I don't think he's going to be, even though he's ahead of the timeline, I've seen the news that's talking about at the combine, he talked about he's ahead of schedule. I don't think he's going to be ready for rookie camp. I think he's going to be pushing that timeline for the start of the season because that's going to be around that 8-month mark as well, which these guys are perfectly capable of coming back, especially with the research that we have and the medical staffs that are available to these players around this time. I think 8-9 months is probably what he's going to be looking at. So that's in terms of when he's like ready to play football. And now he's got to play catch up in terms of getting ready with the team, building some rapport with the quarterback, getting that pro feel, because it is going to be different than college football. I don't know if I'm super optimistic about him in best ball based on that, because I think you're basically going to be trash canning 8, 9, 10 weeks of a fantasy football season. He could help you win down the stretch, but in best ball, unless you're getting some really good picks in other places and getting to the spot where you're still relevant at that point. I mean, you play best ball and you're well aware that if you get off to a slow start and you're, 300, 350 points in the hole, you're not going to win that league. Yeah. So I think it's something in terms of dynasty. I'm not swaying it too much. If I had to pick today in my dynasty leagues, I tell you right now, just based on some of that information, I think I would take George Pickens ahead of Jameson Williams, just because I'm going to be getting early production from George Pickens. Mm-hmm. And there's always that, possibility of when that rookie pops, his value increases tenfold and you can flip him for more. Whereas Jameson Williams is going to be sitting on your bench for a little bit longer. I still think he's a back half of the first round pick in your dynasty rookie drafts, regardless of where he goes, because he's going to be an early pick. But I think there's some question marks there about his availability for 2022. I think it could be a little spotty. I think honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it took a little bit of that Rashad Bateman trajectory in 2022.
Yeah. And it's painful because I had Rashad Bateman. I think a lot of people had him rated really highly, especially after getting that draft capital. And then, as you said, it took him a little while. It takes a while for these rookies to come in and produce. A lot of these rookies, produce in the back half of their rookie season. And if they're not getting the beginning of that season to try and produce, then, it could end up just being a rough year. But Jameson Williams, he's such an intriguing prospect, man. A lot of people, have trouble thinking, oh, this guy couldn't beat out these players in college, so he can't be good. I mean, he pretty much got 16 targets and 13 targets in his 2 years at Ohio State. Went to Alabama, immediately got 118 targets for 1,500 yards, and that's a 19.9 yards per reception while having a 67% catch rate with that yards per reception. I mean, that is an insane year from any player. So I know a lot of people end up having him really highly in their models and their rankings. So I mean, it's really tough with that injury, where to slot him in, because as you said, I mean, you don't know what type of production. You're hoping to have good production years 1 through 3 out of these type of players. And if that year 1, it's just going to be a total wash. I mean, what do you do with it at that point? So, that's going to be a tough one to evaluate.
It is going to be really tough because there's so much excitement about him. If you don't draft him in the first round, I don't know if you're going to be able to trade for him in dynasty leagues, because people aren't going to want to give him up for nothing. They know what they drafted Jameson Williams for. But I just think, depending on where you're at and who's still on the board, if there's still some of those high upside guys like a George Pickens, I might just go that direction, because I'm going to be getting that early production that you talked about in years 1 through 3.
Yeah. All right. Last one. Mailbag question here that we're going to go through. Once again, I did not write down who asked this question, so I'm sorry, guys. I'll step it up next time to write down who these questions are for, so we can actually give credit to those who are asking them. Who are 3 rookie prospects that are flying under the radar? So I'll go ahead and take the brunt of this one. So my first one is Kevin Harris, running back out of South Carolina. He is 5'10", 221. He came into the combine, did not run the 40. He did do the vertical and broad jump, though, and those two combined gave him a 128.5 burst score, which is 89th percentile for someone who is 221 pounds. So burst score is one of those metrics that a lot of people in zone run schemes. So you'll see all the running backs who are playing for like the 49ers and probably whoever the Miami Dolphins bring in. And once upon a time, it was Gary Kubiak's system, where in the Broncos and then the Vikings, they look for those running backs with those high burst scores, because they really just need to get to the outside and burst up the field. So, you can go search it on Player Profiler for all the running backs for those teams, and you'll see that they have high burst scores. So he's going to end up being a good asset for a team that's looking for that. He actually ranked out top 10 in my analytical model for running backs. Noah Hill's a guy who is way underfollowed. He's a really good resource in terms of these running backs and good prospects at Noah More Parties on Twitter. He puts together a pure runner efficiency score, utilizing a few different metrics, and he had similar pure rushing metrics to guys like Nick Chubb, James Conner, and Leonard Fournette, for a guy who's probably going to be going in like the 6th round of the draft this year. He had a crazy sophomore season. I don't know what happened his last season. Maybe it was because he was fighting with Bam Knight for carries. But his sophomore season, he had like over a 40% dominator rating, which is one of the best recorded dominator ratings that I have in my system. I mean, he had 185 touches for 1,100 yards and 16 touchdowns, and had 25 catches for 170 yards. So, I mean, he has the pass catching capability. He had the background to carry a really large load for a team. And I think that he could end up being a steal for a guy who's, as I said, probably going to go in the 6th round of the NFL draft this year.
I can honestly say I don't think I heard of him before you talked about him, but a lot of what you said is definitely something that's interesting. Are we thinking like, in terms of rookie drafts, 3rd, 4th round guy?
Oh, I think he's going 3rd, 4th round. I mean, unless something crazy happens at the NFL draft. I don't know when his pro day is, but he'll probably run his 40 at his pro day. If he blows it out of the water and gets a high speed score, I think he'll start kind of going up a little bit, but I just don't see him going any any earlier than the 5th, 6th, 7th round of the draft. And if that's the case, he's not going until the 3rd or 4th round in these rookie drafts.
Yeah, and I mean, to the point that you made in terms of some of the numbers that you were putting out there, I mean, that's somebody you want to throw a dart on in your rookie draft in the 3rd round and stash their running back. Regardless of where he goes, he's probably going to be an injury away from playing time.
Well, that's the thing about these running backs. Like, if you're getting them in the 3rd or 4th round, the way you get a return on that is if they are a backup running back, the guy gets hurt, and they go in and play 2 games, and they end up winning you those 2 games because they're in there. You got your money. You got your return on investment for that 3rd round pick.
100%.
Next one I have is Jalen Tolbert, wide receiver out of South Alabama. A lot of people don't like him because he has played in college for 5 years. But it's a little bit unfair to him because he did tear his ACL in his first year. So his entire first year was a wash. So he did not play at all. But he had some really impressive. And the thing is, if you're at a small school, because he's a wide receiver out of South Alabama, if you're at a small school, you have to dominate. You have to be really, really, really good at that small school for you to be in consideration. And he did. He had a 96th percentile college dominator, 96th percentile target share. He has really good size. I think he's like at 6'3", 205. So he's got some pretty good size there. And then he ran the 40 at the combine, and he has above 50th percentile speed and burst score. Right now, Grinding the Mocks has him at a 3rd round draft pick. So that's pretty solid draft capital as well for a small school guy who, had some really good stats coming out of college. And all those things combined, you're probably going to get him in the late 2nd, early 3rd round of rookie drafts. And I think that's someone that you could take advantage of, who a team's going to draft him to be a good wide receiver on their team.
Yeah. Reading some of the blurbs from the Senior Bowl, I mean, he just seems like a sneaky athletic guy that probably, like you said, wasn't getting a lot of those accolades because he went to a smaller school, but just put up some numbers that statistically are just jumping out that says, hey, this guy can play. So that makes sense.
Last one. So this is someone who I really didn't look at before the combine, and then after his combine numbers. And, maybe this is one of the reasons why the combine matters, is because you see some of these players and you're like, who is that guy? And then you go and look a little more in depth at these players. So Ty Chandler, running back out of North Carolina. So as mentioned before, a lot of these players will get overlooked because of age. So Ty Chandler he'll probably be 24 by the time he starts his rookie year. So he is a little bit older on the prospects map here, but he did come in at 5'11", 204. And he's kind of considered more of a satellite back. So that's actually a pretty good size for a satellite back. Being at that size, he had a 4.38 40 time. And so that gives him a 92nd percentile speed score. He played at Tennessee his first couple years. And Tennessee hasn't really had a great history of playing their best players. Also, Alvin Kamara, and he transferred over to North Carolina after they lost Jamison Williams and who's the other guy? I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head.
Michael
Carter. So both of them left. In steps Ty Chandler, and he does really well. He has over 1,000 yards rushing, and he ended up looking pretty good. So I think that he's going to end up being a guy who is going to be in late 3rd, 4th round in rookie drafts. And I think there's going to be a point this next season where you're saying, he could be a decent waiver pickup because he'll probably be there in redraft leagues, and he could end up getting you some points because of it. So he's probably my 3rd flying under the radar type of player that I didn't really look at up until the combine, but I think he's an intriguing little prospect.
No, man, I like it. I think those are all smart guys that could be some late round dart throws in rookie drafts, and some people that could give fantasy gamers the edge, which is why we're doing this show.
Yeah, for sure. But that's all we're gonna do for this show. And as I said, next week, for next week, we're gonna be looking into wide receivers who are gonna have a little more running back usage. The NFL is going a little more positionless for these type of players, and you're gonna see a lot more coming into the league. But Adam, this has been fun, man. 2 years in waiting, and I'm glad we have episode 1 under our belt here.
Yeah, man. Went a little longer, but that's what happens when you're having fun and streaming the first show. We had a little technical difficulties, but I think it was a success, and I'm excited to do it. And I hope that this is something that people out there like listening to.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in. We look forward to talking to y'all next week.
Peace.
See ya.